On today's episode of Locked On NHL, we've got a trade to announce.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to Locked On NHL Western Conference Tuesdays. I am Brett Holden from Locked On Oilers and Locked On NHL, I guess, but from Locked On Oilers, and joining me, of course, as always on every Tuesday, Dane Lewis from Locked On Stars. Dane, how's it going?
It's going great. My camera works this week, so we're already off to a better start than we were at this point 7 days ago.
That's all you can ask for, eh? Progress. That's all you can ask
That's right.
for. Speaking of progress, the Vancouver Canucks rebuild, or depending on who you ask, retool, is making some progress, as yesterday the Vancouver Canucks have made a trade sending Bo Horvat to the New York Islanders. We will talk about that trade in just a second. But also on today's episode, we're going to make another trade, at least make the case for the next Western Conference superstar to be traded. Who will it be and where will they go and why should they get traded? That's coming up a little later. And to wrap up today's episode, the Winnipeg Jets get a massive win against the St. Louis Blues last night, but there may be some Blues roaming around in Winnipeg. We will talk about that and so much more on today's episode of Locked On NHL. Thank you for making Locked On NHL your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you find your podcast. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more by visiting FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. Dane, where we are going to get started is where the silly season is getting started, with a trade. The Vancouver Canucks have made, I guess, technically their second move after sending off Bruce Boudreau in only the most beautiful way possible last week. But they have made their second big move in sending Bo Horvat to the New York Islanders in exchange for Anthony Beauvillier, Aatu Raty, and a first-round pick. Dane, initial thoughts to this deal?
Yeah, it's a move that I was expecting Horvat to get traded and likely to an Eastern Conference team, a powerhouse type team, if you will. And so I was a little bit surprised to see that he was going to the Islanders, which we don't talk about the Islanders here on Tuesdays because they're not in the Western Conference. So that's a different discussion for a different day, maybe an Eastern Conference episode, but not a trade I was expecting. And it really just kind of felt random too. I had actually just finished recording a Locked On Stars episode and was doing some stuff on Twitter, getting the socials, the thumbnail, the post for the next day, and Twitter's just exploding because of this big deal. And yeah, I mean, say what you want about the Canucks, they're not very relevant in terms of standing or points or playoff projections, but they've done a good job at staying in the news cycle throughout the entirety of the season with Bruce Boudreau. They re-signed Andrei Kuzmenko, and now they've made this move, and it seems like a pretty decent trade for both sides. The Islanders get a top six player that can maybe boost them up in the standings. And it seems initially like a decent return for the Canucks, who I imagine this won't be the last move that they make. They could maybe make a few other moves here and try to acquire either more prospects or maybe some more draft picks. But it seems like a pretty even trade initially afterwards.
Well, and I think you say the important part, and that is initially. We shall see long term how this goes. Now, just to shore up a loose end here, the first round pick is a 2023 first round pick, but it is top 12 protected. So it seems like maybe the NHL may have learned from the Florida Panthers mistake, maybe a draft too late. Either way, this is a little bit of a longer term deal, and as it should be for the Vancouver Canucks. Anthony Beauvillier so far this year in 49 games, 9 goals, 11 assists, 20 points. top six guy you mentioned, he's not a guy who's going to fill up uh, the score sheet. But the guy that I'm really excited to see where this goes is Aatu Raty. Aatu Raty was a top three projected pick going into his draft year in 2021. That didn't end up happening, ended up falling quite a ways down the draft board. In fact, he ended up getting selected 52nd overall. And a lot of people were going, oh, this is a pretty big steal for the New York Islanders. Again, this is a guy, yes, in his draft year, saw a little bit of a regression when it came to points. But again, you have to think about the fact that he was playing against full on adults for the first time. Then goes down to Bridgeport in the AHL for the Islanders. Has a very solid season, or at least very solid start to his professional career. Gets some time with the Islanders in the NHL this year, and now he will be sent to Vancouver's AHL team in Abbotsford. What do you kind of make of the Aatu Raty inclusion in this deal? Because this is kind of now setting the market for the rest of the trades for the rest of this trade season. That is a player, a pick, and a prospect right there. What do you make of the prospect that they get in this deal?
Yeah, I think it's a pretty big deal in that, like you said, that a lot of people think that this player was potentially a steal for the Islanders, and there appears to be a lot of upside for a player like Ratu, and so I think that sets the bar pretty high for some other trades that other teams can maybe squeeze a little bit more in terms of returns for a star player or some sort of package deal potentially with that move being made. It seems like the Canucks, like you said, they covered all the bases. They got a guy that can play in the NHL, a guy that is going to be at the AHL level, like you mentioned, and a draft pick that seems like it could be a pretty decent pick. And I think it could do quite a bit in terms of shaking things up with the rest of this trade season for give or take the next month. And I think that could potentially be a really good pickup for the Canucks. I mean, just adding this youthful talent that isn't NHL ready yet, but they don't really need him to be. He has time to develop and continue to grow his game. And then, in theory, when the Canucks are back to a competitive level in maybe 2, 3, 4 seasons, Ratu is only going to be 23, 24. And in theory, at that point, he should be well developed and hopefully contributing to whatever efforts they've put forth to be competitive in the Western Conference yet again. So yeah, we all knew the Bo Horvat trade was coming, and it seems like they got a pretty decent return for sending off one of the best players they've had in a while, and obviously their captain. I mean, that's a pretty big hole to fill in the locker room and in the organization, especially one that seems to not have a ton of direction like the Canucks do right now. To be down, one of your key leaders on and off the ice that's hard to replace, but it seems like they've gotten some pretty decent turnaround for moving on from Bo Horvat.
I mentioned here that Aatu Raty had a little bit of a tough year in his draft year in 2020, 2021 with Karpat in La Liga, which is, or not La Liga, that is a soccer league, in Liga, which is the Finnish elite league, or the former Finnish elite league. In 35 games with Karpat, 3 goals, 3 assists, 6 points. The following year at Ukrit in Liga, he had 41 games played, 13 goals, 27 assists, 40 points. So maybe a situation of being in the right situation for him, or whatever that may be. This is still a guy who was slated to go top 3, top 5, top 10 for a very long time. I think this is when he was selected in the 52nd round, I thought this was a steal. I think this is a great move for Vancouver. Maybe again, we talked about setting the market price. Maybe this does kind of set the market for everybody else. Maybe they look at Ratu and go, we have better prospects, or whatever that may be. You can start to kind of make your moves from here on out. Either way, we have our first big move really of the year. I'm going to give Clean Costin the only move really of the year so far. That's worthwhile. But Bo Horvat, New York Islander. I don't know if I expected to say that at all. Either way, there's going to be a lot of players from here on to the March 3rd trade deadline that will be finding new homes. Dane and I are making the case for one player who will be the next player on the move next. But first, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. We are really excited about our new sports betting partner for Locked On because they are the number one sports book in America, FanDuel. And if you're new to FanDuel, that's even better. They have so many great features that makes betting on sports fun and easy. Download FanDuel now so you can bet on Super Bowl 57. Yes, Super Bowl 57 with a no sweat first bet. You'll get up to $3,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. FanDuel lets you bet on everything, including the money line to point spreads to who will even score the touchdown to scoring a touchdown or the next touchdown. Either way, somebody's scoring a touchdown, and my tongue is getting locked up. Now, we know that my bet or my call for the Super Bowl this year was the San Francisco 49ers and the Cincinnati Bengals. That didn't happen. That was an upsetting Sunday. That is for sure. So I am going to stop talking about the NFL bets, and we are going to talk about the NHL odds for tonight, as we are only a couple days away from the All-Star break. Only a couple of games still going here, and mostly Eastern teams playing still, but the Los Angeles Kings getting some action tonight against the Carolina Hurricanes. There's some underdogs on the money line here, plus 168, where the Hurricanes are minus 205 favorites. What are we doing here? Dane, we're Western Conference guys. What are these numbers here for the LA Kings?
I don't know. They must be taking into account that home ice advantage for the Canes. It's a tough place to play in, and the Kings have trouble stopping the puck from going in the back of the net. -9 goal differential, so maybe they know a little bit more than meets the eye.
Yeah, and they certainly know more than I do. Either way, the FanDuel Sportsbook app is safe, secure, and super easy to use. Best of all, you can get paid your winnings instantly. So join FanDuel today at fanduel.com/locked on to claim your no sweat first bet on Super Bowl 57. That is fanduel.com/locked on. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Alrighty, Dane, we talked about the first big move and the first big fish coming off the market in Bo Horvat with the trade. But as mentioned, there's a lot of time between now and March 3rd. So there's still time for the next trade to be made. Dane, who do you think? We are going to have a little bit of a city hall, town hall, or whatever they call it, of trades here. Dane, I am going to ask you who you think will be the next Western Conference player traded this year. Make the case why. Be absolutely, get your best Atticus Finch out and just go full out. Tell me why you think this player is getting traded, where they're getting traded to. It doesn't have to be exact. This isn't a prediction, but I want to know who you think will be the next player traded, and I'll give you mine.
Yeah, there's a lot of ways that we can go with this, and I kind of went back and forth, but I think at the end of the day, it might be the safe answer or an easy answer. But I do think, especially after another Pacific team like Vancouver makes a move, I think Timo Meier could be on his way out of San Jose very,
Took
very
mine.
soon. Oh, I see. I knew that was going to happen. I was like, I bet one of both of us has Timo Meyer, and
Yeah.
I almost went with John Klingberg out of Anaheim, but
Mm.
he just doesn't quite pack the same star power punch in my eyes as Meyer with 48 points, 28 goals, 20 assists, and I think with Meyer, you have to take into account that he's rumored to go to a lot of different Eastern Conference teams, and now you have the Islanders, and while they're sitting on the outside of a playoff spot looking in, that now that they have Bo Horvat, you have to imagine that in theory that they're going to get maybe a little bit better, score a few more goals, pick up that offensive production that they've been so desperately missing at 55 points. And they're only 2 points out of a playoff spot. So not too far removed, but you have to imagine other teams in the Metro division are taking this into account and want to bolster their rosters as well to make sure there's separation between themselves and the Islanders as well as the other teams in the division. And so I've seen it rumored a lot, and I think it makes a lot of sense that the New Jersey Devils are going to be shopping Timo Meyer. They already have a pretty solid offense this season. Jack Hughes, Jesper Bratt, Nico Heischer. It's a very, very good young team, and I think they could also benefit from. It's weird calling Timo Meyer a veteran because he's not a very old player, but he has been around for a little bit now and clearly can hold his own on this San Jose team. And I think it makes a lot of sense. The specifics of the trade, I'm not entirely sure because I'm not very familiar with New Jersey's prospect pool, but you have to imagine with the young talent they've already developed that they probably have some other good guys in the wings that could get moved as well as draft picks. You can't imagine. I mean, a first round pick could probably do some good for the Devils, but if they're going to finish top three in their division and make the playoffs, it might not be as valuable. Whereas you can flip that first round pick for a guy like Meyer, who in theory helps you make a little bit deeper run in the playoffs and bolsters the roster a little bit. And so that's my prediction for Timo Meyer. I think he gets sent to the New Jersey Devils, and I think maybe sooner rather than later because the Sharks are probably looking at that haul that the Canucks got, and they thought, oh, we could probably get some of that, if not more. And so you have to imagine the Sharks, who are in a similar position to the Canucks, are pretty excited to acquire picks, prospects, things of that nature in order to boost their capital for the future.
Well, you wanna play the market, don't let the market play you kind of deal, hey? And I like that kind of maybe urgency you kind of set with the San Jose Sharks, where if that is the market price that is obvious for maybe not an exactly linear player in Timo Meyer, but a very similar player, and at least when it comes to the trade market now, he is a very similar player. So now you're sitting here and going, okay, they got a player, a pick, and a prospect in that deal. You mentioned New Jersey. You know what? I like their prospects here. Now, I know guys like Luke Hughes won't be a part of that deal. There's no way they can let Luke Hughes be a part of that deal. Maybe a guy like Shakir Moukmadulin, Alexander Holtz, maybe I've seen thrown around in a potential deal for him. I don't mind their prospects. I could really see that, and Nemec being the only other player that or prospect that I don't see them really parting from. Other than that, most of them I could see them moving. Even how about a goaltender as well, going in there? In they have Ty Brennan, Nico Dawes. They have some pretty interesting goaltending pros, and I believe Garant as well, Dylan Garant. So they have some pretty interesting prospects. I could see that. And again, just kind of setting that the market has been set. You know what the price of players is now, especially in a player like Bo Horvat slash Timo Meyer. So yeah, no, I can see it. I am fully behind a Timo Meyer deal happening basically any time now. I'm happy we got this Bo Horvat deal, but Timo Meyer, no, absolutely. Now I'm in a bit of a interesting pickle, maybe we can say. Now I wanted to say Timo Meyer too because it does seem like that is the most not obvious, but it just makes the most sense. He is a very similar type player in Bo Horvat. He can score goals nearly next to will. So you can have a player who can go out there, score goals, and be a very helpful player in the playoffs. My next player who I think will end up getting moved, I'm not going defenseman. You mentioned John Klingberg. And I was also then thinking maybe Jacob Chikrin, but I think Chikrin's going to be a deadline deal. I think that's going to be not necessarily last minute, but pretty close. My next trade is for Vladimir Tarasenko. Vladimir Tarasenko and the St. Louis Blues. We talked about with the St. Louis Blues just a couple of weeks ago about where the St. Louis Blues are. It's time to crap or get off the pot, basically, for the St. Louis Blues. And now we're sitting here and we're going to talk more about the Central Division in a little bit. In fact, we're going to talk about the St. Louis Blues as well. But the Blues, 49 points, basically, not necessarily in a battle with the Arizona Coyotes here, but they have a player coming back in Ryan O'Reilly that is almost sure to get moved as well. I think that is also a deadline deal. I have Tarasenko being the first player going because now they kind of see the market on. I would say, Bo Horvat's goal total so far this year is much higher than Vladimir Tarasenko's, but you know what Tarasenko can bring to a team. I have him moving first, not only setting the market or following the market for the St. Louis Blues, but also kind of setting the market of sorts for the St. Louis Blues, not for everybody else, but for the St. Louis Blues. I mentioned they have to move Ryan O'Reilly. Potentially, there may be even more. I could see, keep it on the hush hush, maybe a guy like Colton Parayko going as well. They Craig Berube just had a little bit of a spat with Parayko. We'll talk about what just happened in Winnipeg as well. But I could see them kind of setting the market with Vladimir Tarasenko, sending him to a team like the Calgary Flames, maybe. I don't know, but just having a player who can kind of set the pace for an offense, set the pace for a team that really needs some sort of offensive kick, and kickstart almost the deadline for not only the Blues but whoever he ends up getting traded to. So I have Vladimir Tarasenko. Am I kind of out to lunch here? Am I kind of just old man yells at cloud here, or what do you think?
I like that move. I think that's a very underrated move just because of the Blues being in this weird space where they're not a good enough team to be considered in the playoff conversation, but they're also not in the basement of the league with, your Anaheims and Arizonas and Chicagos of the world. So they're just kind of in no man's land right now. And I think that a lot of their players also fall under that umbrella, like Tarasenko, who, like you said, way less production than Horvat with only 10 goals. I think Horvat has 31. But I think there's still some value there for a guy that's, been to the Stanley Cup finals, who's won a Stanley Cup. And yeah, like you said, I think Calgary would be an interesting fit. They're a team that's looking for a little bit more stability in the lineup, and I think you add a veteran to that group. And I don't know. I think you also have. This literally just popped in my head as I said that. You have Nazem Kadri on that team who had some run-ins with the St. Louis Blues in the playoffs. So is there would there be something there that prevents that trade, or do they still make that trade? And is the locker room chemistry thrown out of whack and thrown out of a peaceful or whatever we might consider peaceful in the NHL for
Yep.
a locker room environment? I think that's something to consider. But
Yep.
yeah, I think Tarasenko could certainly be on the move, and I'd be curious to see where he goes because you can't imagine the Blues are going to be looking to deal to a Central Division team to give them the upper hand in the regular season or the postseason. So I
Yeah.
think a Pacific Division team definitely does make sense, though.
And just to wrap up, I think you make a really good point where people are going, "Oh, they're professionals. That type of stuff never happens." It happens more than you think. Just recently this year, Ryan Reaves traded to the Minnesota Wild, and the Edmonton Oilers were very heavily linked to Ryan Reaves. We had a lot of people around here close to the team as well, not necessarily, saying it's a done deal, but it was at the time when the Edmonton Oilers were on their East Coast swing. And a lot of people were going, don't be surprised if the Edmonton Oilers come home with Ryan Reaves. However, the thing that also started coming up was that, yes, the Edmonton Oilers might get Ryan Reaves, but Ryan Reaves has had a little bit of a spat in the past with Evander Kane. Now, we know that Ryan Reaves was then sent to the Minnesota Wild, and what I have heard is that one of the hesitations on acquiring Ryan Reaves for the Edmonton Oilers. Yes, they were having guys like Klim Kostin stepping up down lower in the lineup. By the way, second shout out for Klim Kostin on this episode. But it was also because of the relationship or lack thereof between Ryan Reaves and Evander Kane. Pretty real stuff when it comes to acquiring a player. You want to keep that sort of culture, a good culture, or one that is passable in your locker room the same way, because that's a very important thing. You want to play for the guy next to you, not so much anything potentially worse. Either way, let's wrap up the trade conversations there. As mentioned, Bo Horvat to the New York Islanders, and could Timo Meier and Vladimir Tarasenko be the next two players on their way out? Either way, as mentioned, we'll wrap up the trade talk, and we'll wrap up today's episode with a little bit of Central talk. As where do the Winnipeg Jets currently sit? And why is there a weird little question mark around the Winnipeg Jets, who sit second in the Central Division? I almost said the Winnipeg Division. In the Central Division, we will talk about that in just a second. But first, today's episode is brought to you by Athletic Greens. Our next partner has a product I use literally every day. I started using AG1 because I wanted to better my gut health, optimize my immune system, and I wanted to take a supplement that wasn't just so many pills. And that is exactly what I get with AG1. So, what is this stuff? With one delicious scoop of AG1, you're absorbing 75 high quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens to help you start your day right. This special blend of ingredients supports your gut health, your nervous system, your immune system, your energy, recovery, focus, aging, all of the things, Dane. All of the things. I can't believe that long of a list AG1 helps out with. Either way, it's also lifestyle friendly. Whether you eat keto, paleo, vegan, dairy-free, or gluten-free, it also contains less than 1 gram of sugar, no GMOs, no nasty chemicals or artificial anything, all while still tasting great. It costs less than $3 a day. You are investing in your health, and it is cheaper than your cold brew addiction. I would know. I may have stopped by a certain coffee shop today. Either way, Athletic Greens has over 7,000 5-star reviews and is recommended by professional athletes. Right now, it is time to reclaim your health and arm your immune system with convenient daily nutrition. It is just one scoop in a cup of water every day. That is it. No need for a million different pills and supplements to look out for your health. To make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/NHL network. Again, that is athleticgreens.com/NHL network to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. Speaking of insurance, Dane, I almost called them the New York Jets. The Winnipeg Jets, 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 baby, are currently sitting second in the Central Division, 32-19 and 1 overtime loss. They are sitting with 65 points, 1 point behind. I don't know if you ever heard of the Dallas Stars. Maybe you have, Dane. I don't know. But I was watching the game last night between the Winnipeg Jets and the St. Louis Blues, and the broadcast kept making it sound like the sky was falling for the Winnipeg Jets. I will get into a little bit why they were saying the Winnipeg Jets sky is falling. They're in a city that may need the sky to fall to maybe make it look pretty. Hey, it's pretty in the summer, guys. Come on. Either way, Dane, what do you think about the potential of the Winnipeg Jets maybe faltering at some point this year, or do you think this is just hogwash?
I think it's a little bit of both. The Jets are a team that took a ton of people, including myself, by surprise. I think I had them finishing sixth in the Central Division, and I remember even talking with Harrison over at Locked On Jets, doing the Central Division season previews, where we did a crossover with every show. So I talked to all seven other Central Division shows, and even he was like, yeah, this team could maybe at best be a top three team, but could also very well miss the playoffs. I just don't think anyone had any sort of expectations for this squad. They lose Barry Trotz, or no, Barry Trotz was supposed to come there, didn't come there after being let go from the Islanders. He doesn't come. They get Rick Bowness, who Stars fans know as good of a coach and respected of a man as he is. Like, wasn't getting the job done in Dallas, although he did all he could as the interim in 2019, and almost took the team to the Stanley Cup, so on and so forth. But I mean, that happens. You take the captaincy from Blake Wheeler. Pierre-Luc Dubois seemed like he was going to potentially walk in the offseason and go somewhere else. But here they are, like you said, second in the Central Division, only a point behind the Dallas Stars. And I think, as good of a year as they've had, everyone kind of keeps waiting for, like you said, the sky to fall to say, is this really sustainable? Or is this team just kind of hitting new coach, newfound chemistry in the locker room, and is the gas eventually going to run out, or is this truly, a team that can make the playoffs at where they're at, a top three team in the Central, and maybe even potentially make a run? It's one of the most peculiar things we've seen this season. A team that I don't think anyone was really talking about going into the year, and now here they are with maybe the best goalie in the NHL in Connor Hellebuck, maybe the best defenseman in the NHL this season in Josh Morrissey, who is two goals last night against the Blues.
Not
And
bad.
I mean, him and Mark Scheifele both getting two goals, and it's guys like Scheifele as well. He's having a great season. Blake Wheeler, not the captain, by the C on his jersey, but I think still playing a crucial role with this team, and that's really what it is. I think it's just a group of guys, none of them necessarily superstars in the league, but they do their jobs and they do it well. And I mean, I think there could be some truth to sometimes things just end and run out. I mean, we saw teams like Philadelphia get off to a really hot start this season, and now they've kind of teetered out to where we expected them to be. I don't think Winnipeg will necessarily fall out of a playoff spot. I think they've done too well to lose that positioning, but it wouldn't surprise me if we see some sort of regression at some point. Although I don't think it would be anything too significant, it wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah. Now the Winnipeg Jets have had injury issues so far this year. Whether some guys have missed time, especially Nick Ehlers as well. I mean, you talked about Blake Wheeler. We're not going to specifically talk about the injury that he had, but let's just say it was a very difficult injury,
Oh yeah.
especially one below the belt. Yeah, that one. But last night, you did mention as well, the Winnipeg Jets did beat the St. Louis Blues 4-2. All four of the Jets' goals coming in the fourth period, the third period, excuse me. They didn't go to overtime, and you can't score 4 goals in overtime. Either way, all 4 goals for the Jets coming in that fourth period or third period. I don't know where I'm getting this fourth period from. Either way, the final period of the game, they had to come back from 2-0 down. Now, I am a subscriber to The Athletic, Dane. I don't know if you've ever heard of The Athletic, but it's a pretty good little. It's very niche. I don't know if you ever heard of it, but I'm a big fan of The Athletic, and Murat Eights from The Athletic wrote a very good article on what's going on with the Jets and how it changes their approach at the trade deadline. And the first portion of this article says the Jets' struggles look real. I'm not sure to what degree exhaustion has played a role, how much to attribute to injuries, and how much to read into Rick Bonus's Saturday night assertion that the Jets still had a lot of work to do, even when they were winning. Now, I thought that was an interesting little note because I went back to the Jets' last couple of games. On January 19th, last Thursday, 4-1 loss to the Toronto Maple Leafs, a 5-1 win to the Senators on January 21st, which was, I mean, you better win that one. But then 5-3 win over the Flyers, 2-1 loss to the Predators, 3-2 loss to the Sabres, and then in the replay against the Flyers, a 4-0 loss. Now, I mentioned it's very interesting that they bring up while they were winning. I mentioned that they have had injuries in the past. Right now, as of recording this, their only injuries are Mason Appleton, David Gustafson, and Dylan DeMello. Obviously, that doesn't mean guys like Nick Ehlers hasn't been injured. I think they have been saved by probably the Vezina favorite right now in Connor Hellebuck. But all the teams behind the Jets right now currently have games in hand. As mentioned, the Jets have 52 games played. The Wild have 48. The Avalanche have 48. The Predators have 48. All teams who are relatively in striking distance. You can probably stop it at the Avalanche. But my issue for the Winnipeg Jets becomes, what if the move that they do make at the deadline is the wrong move? What if the move that they make is a move that maybe would help them in the 3 games that they lost rather than the games in the future? Then maybe it's a backline issue. Then all of a sudden your defenseman room is a little more crowded. You can't put out the players that you want to, blah, 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 blah. This starts getting bigger of an issue than it actually should be. The interesting thing as well in this article is that Bonus cemented or doubled down on his comments saying it doesn't just mean on the ice. That could be a very, very important note when it comes to later on in the season. It's not just on the ice. It was weird seeing Paul Maurice leaving. Bonus comes in. A lot of people are going, oh, we don't want anything to do with this organization, blah, 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 blah. You're living in Winnipeg for 6 months. I get it. But could there be more than just the stuff that is happening on the ice? We heard Mark Scheifele go at the end of last year. I have to talk to my agents and the team, and we'll see. We'll go from there. Pierre-Luc Dubois is not suiting up for the Winnipeg Jets next season. We know that. It's his last year as a Winnipeg Jet. So my concern now over the Winnipeg Jets doesn't stop at this season. My concern for the Winnipeg Jets comes for the seasons following. As mentioned, Pierre-Luc Dubois is leaving. Do we know the state of Mark Scheifele? Do we know, you can keep going on? Josh Morrissey is going to need more money in the offseason, or maybe not this offseason, but is going to need more money. You can go down their list, and at times, their lineup has been bad. Do you think that this could be an issue that doesn't only follow this season, but following seasons as well?
Definitely, and I think that's it. Sounds just like something that would happen to Winnipeg, where they have this great season, and then going into next year, people will be really high on them, and then we very well could see what was expected of them this year, where they're just maybe a middle of the pack below average team because, like you said, they could look very, very different. Just looking at cap friendly, it looks like more than half of their forwards are going to be free agents next year, whether that's restricted or unrestricted. Pierre-Luc Dubois, Morgan Barron. I mean, all these and some of these guys are names that I'm not super familiar with, and guys that aren't getting paid a ton of money, and guys that aren't necessarily producing a ton in the lineup. I think it's a very top heavy lineup with Kyle Connor, Blake Wheeler, Mark Scheifele, Josh Morrissey, and then after that, it's just kind of like some regular guys that can get the job done on some nights, but it's not a team that's just going to blow you away night after night. It's a roster that can get shut out by the Philadelphia Flyers, which you don't see very often, let alone from a team that is second in their division, second in the conference, and potentially gunning for a top spot. So I think it's something that could maybe be an issue this season as time goes on, but the future makes me unsure. And this Jets team is also just in such a weird space at the deadline because they actually have a decent amount of cap space, $5.2 million, which is a lot of money at the current state of the NHL. I know for the Stars, I think they only have like 1.5 million in cap space right now, so they
What
could
is
go out and
cap
make a
space?
big move. But it's more than just. It's likely, I say, more than just selling this player that you want to get for this season. You would just have to think it'd be more than a rental. I mean, because I think this Jets team is good, but I don't think that they're by any means a favorite to win the cup. And so you have to maybe sell this player to come and live in Winnipeg, move their family to Winnipeg to be a part of this team for the foreseeable future. And I just don't know how enticing that would be for any player that's potentially going to be moved here in the next month.
Yeah, living in Winnipeg can confirm not enticing. Either way, just to wrap up, Dane, do the Winnipeg Jets make the playoffs?
I don't know what that
Oh,
was. Some music playing there. I think like a digital.
ooh, got a little, got a little bit of La Bamba going, eh? No, I just wanted to wrap up quickly on what do you think? If you think the Winnipeg Jets do make the playoffs?
I think they will. Again, I think they've done too much up to this point to miss. I think. I mean, if they do miss, I wouldn't be entirely shocked. But I'm just looking, especially at the rest of the Central. I think Colorado probably finds a way into the top three, and Minnesota could stick around. So I think they'll get in. Whether or not they'll be a top three team in the division is still up for grabs. I think they could slip into a wild card spot, but I think they'll get in. I think they'd get in over a Nashville. And I think that's kind of the cutoff line if you're looking at the Western Conference playoff picture. Nashville with 54 points, and the next team closest to them is St. Louis at 49. And I don't necessarily see St. Louis climbing out of the pit that they're in. So I think that there's a small enough amount of teams that they can make it in, and I think they will.
I agree. I agree. Either way, for all of your Jet stuff you mentioned, Harrison, make sure you check out Locked On Winnipeg Jets for Harrison's take on what is going on with the Winnipeg Jets. That goes for all the teams we talked about. The Canucks, Gil over at Locked On Islanders does a fantastic job. And speaking of which, Hattie over at Locked On NHL Prospects. I'm sure he has a little something on Aatu Raty as well. Either way, let's wrap it up there. Dane, where can the people find you?
As always, people can find me on Twitter at Dane_Lewis. They can find any and all Stars information at Locked On Stars. You mentioned The Athletic. Well, I'm a big supporter of The Athletic as well. Actually, just had Saad Youssef, who covers the Stars for The Athletic, on today's episode. So you can find that on your podcasting platform of choice or YouTube. We, at the end, made hockey starting lineups out of Brooklyn Nine-Nine characters because Saad Youssef will, after every Stars game, he'll tweet a GIF reacting to the game based on a TV show. And this season, it's Brooklyn Nine-Nine. So we built some hockey lineups out of characters from that show. It is a ton of fun. So if that's something that would interest you, be sure to check that out either, again, on YouTube, Locked On Stars, or your podcasting platform of choice.
That certainly interests me. That's really cool. But you can find me at the Real Holden 40 on everything. That is Twitter, Instagram. I think my Spotify is also the Real Holden 40. Yeah, I have a couple of bangers. I'm just saying.
Just
But you
just
don't care about
on the Spotify Wrapped all the way.
yeah, yeah,
That's
exactly.
right.
Hey, I always have the best Spotify Wrapped of all my friends. I just it's always a bragging right. Either way, you don't care about me, you care about the Edmonton Oilers, and you can find Locked On Oilers at Locked On Oilers on Twitter, and you can find us on YouTube, Locked On Oilers. They're exactly how it sounds. I got lucky. Plus, you get to see some really cool jerseys. Either way, let's wrap it up there, folks. We are heading into the All-Star break. We're going to have some All-Star talk next week, I am sure, as the All-Star game comes up this weekend. Either way, let's wrap it up there, folks. Have a wonderful day and stay safe.